into all of that in a couple minutes now and a whole lot more. But tell me, how are you doing on this fine Sunday evening?
I'll tell you what, I'm doing better than I was last week. We'll start with that. But not too bad. What about you?
I'm doing all right. I would say the same thing. I thought, when that game started out yesterday and it was 14-0, I thought, wow, looks like the problems run much deeper than the head coach, and I'm not saying that they don't, but it was just a predictable way, knowing this team, for things to start. But maybe things are different now under Donte Williams, and maybe this is a new era of USC football. So why don't we get right into it, Anthony? It was an exciting debut for Coach Williams in his first game as interim head coach at USC. Give me what were your first impressions, what were the most notable first impressions of the Donte Williams era, because it looked like to me they were an entirely different team, especially in the second half.
Yeah. You talked about it. The second half. That was the thing I really paid attention to. The second half adjustments kind of like didn't really happen under Clay Helton, and it was just a completely different ball club in the second half. 45 straight points, no points allowed the entire second half. That was really the main thing that I saw. Kind of just those adjustments they made, and I think also I don't know if this was kind of attributed to Donte Williams, but the offense just looked very aggressive in the pass game. Maybe it was a Graham Harrell thing, but it just looked completely different too. The first half still had some problems, but the second half looked a little bit deep, attempting more deep passes, and the offense just looking more electric, really. And the other thing was the penalties that we talked about last week, and the fact that Donte Williams, leading up to the game, was saying that he would punish players for committing penalties. There weren't too many. I don't have it off the top of my head, but I remember one specific play where Chris Steele had a penalty, and that's your best corner, and he took him out immediately for a play. So we kind of lived up to that. But really the main thing, second half adjustments. I mean, they were down 14-0, and to win 45-14 after that, there were some adjustments that definitely were made. Maybe you can attribute it to Jay and Delora getting injured, but that was really the main thing. I mean, they made adjustments. The penalties weren't too much, and the red zone conversion rate was higher, and also just third quarter scoring, like a crazy concept under Clay Helton. I don't think the stat was they hadn't scored in the third quarter for about 8 games. So the fact they were able to put up 3-4 touchdowns in the third quarter alone was very impressive, very impressive. And the lack of penalties was the main thing that I noticed.
They entered that game this season having trailed the third quarter 21-3. They won the quarter 28-0. And I think you kind of hit it on the head there, which is the adjustments on offense, on defense, in every facet of the game were incredible. But to me, more than anything else, perhaps, it was just the energy that the team came out with in the second half. I mean, in the Stanford game especially, came out at halftime and you were kind of feeling, okay, they look like they have a chance. But then you see them on the sideline, and there's a lot of slumping. There's a lot of negative body language. There's just not a lot of cohesion there, and that was when I first started to think maybe this isn't actually going to happen. Maybe it's not going to work out the way that they want it to. But I didn't see any of that in Pullman. I mean, they came out, they were fired up. Donte Williams said the things that I told my team at halftime. Many of them I can't repeat, which is fair. But he was essentially saying, just know that the guys were ready to play, and they were ready to play. I mean, they came out. The first play of the second half was the fumble on the opening kick that Parker Lewis got. And by the way, Parker Lewis has had the weirdest season for a kicker I've ever seen in my entire life. He's been pretty much nails from field goals. He's kicked a few kickoffs out of bounds. He's been ruled for targeting, which I think was the first targeting on a kicker in college football history. And then he recovered a fumble. So that guy, it's been a very involved season from a kicker's perspective for him. But yeah, it was just they just came out and they were playing like they had somebody had lit a fire, and somebody, I guess you can attribute that to being Donte Williams. The guys were saying that, they have this whole thing that they say every 5 seconds. They're like, it's all about going 1-0 on every play, every rep, and they say it like every 5 seconds, like I said, and it's just the only thing that they want to talk about. But it seemed like that was the approach, as cheesy as it may sound. It seemed like that was the approach in the second half. They were just trying to win every play, and they did. I mean, there were very few mistakes made in that third quarter. I think that was the Jaxson Dart interception where, yeah, it was a pick, but it was 3rd and 10, and he threw it like to the Washington State 5, and probably not much was going to come out of that play anyway. So they were kind of talking about how that was basically a punt, and it was. So it was basically a flawless quarter. It was probably the most dominant quarter of football I've seen from this team in a long time. And then they just looked like they were playing together as a team way more than they have been in the last couple of weeks and the last couple of seasons, actually. Donte Williams kissing Jaxson Dart on the cheek was awesome. He said after the game, he was like, if he's going to keep on making plays like that, I'm going to keep on kissing him on the cheek. I guess whatever works. And then the physicality to me really stuck out. They just looked like they weren't going to get pushed around by a clearly inferior Washington State team. They practiced in full pads on Tuesday and Wednesday, and it seemed to have paid off. I mean, especially opening the third quarter with the fumble, as I said. So, it just looked like there was so much more energy. This was a game where it didn't look like, a lot of the time this team gets down and they stay down. There wasn't any of that in this game. I thought the 4th and 9 play when Dart hit Gary Bryant for a 38-yard touchdown to close the first half was just kind of epitomized how much, this team values being trusted and values being, having a coach that believes in it. I'm not saying that Clay Helton didn't at all. I'm sure he did. It was like one of his biggest things. He believed in his guys. He was, he loved the players loved him back. But I think that play was huge and just showing that, this was a team that was down, but it certainly wasn't out. The goal line stand to open the second quarter was also huge because that would have put them down 14-0. And then the touchdown on the next drive would have put them down 21-0. And all of a sudden you're looking at a 3-score game. And that's a hole that, if they're playing the offense like they did in the second half, they can dig themselves out of. But the whole game plays out a little bit differently from there. So, yeah, it just looked like a totally, reignited team that looked like they were playing together. They looked like they were playing with energy. They looked like they were trusting each other. They looked like they were having fun. I mean, guys were picking each other up. It was a complete performance, and it was Donte opened up tonight's press conference with the media over Zoom by saying we played one good half of football, which is true. The first half wasn't very great, except for maybe the last minute when they had that 38-yard touchdown. But I think that was the quarter that I was looking for most. The third quarter was when I was really trying to think, okay, what impact is he going to make on this team in week one? Because we know that there are going to be adjustments made as far as schemes, as far as game plans go. But that was the big thing. Can he get them ready at halftime? And dude, it seemed like he did.
Yeah, that was honestly what I was looking forward to. Because in the past, USC has not been a great third quarter team. They just kind of collapse when they have a lead like that, or not a lead, a deficit. And you talked about something that's really important, the energy and the cohesiveness. We really haven't seen that in a while. I mean, definitely not last season. And the season before, we hadn't really seen that too much. So this is the first time, and you can say that was the Donte Williams effect, kind of giving more confidence to them, kind of making it seem like, they're all together. And that 1-0 mantra is just kind of ridiculous, in my opinion, the way they use it. It's almost like, hey, I'm going to eat this and go 1-0 while eating it. That's kind of like how they use it. But if it works, it works. But the energy that they had on the sideline, too, I wasn't personally at the game, but just from the reporters that were tweeting it out, sound like they had lots of energy on the sideline and they weren't really down and out. Donte Williams also talked about that. Even when they were down, people weren't too negative. They were still just looking to keep going and doing that 1-0 mantra. So really, yeah, you touched it all. I mean, the energy was so big and just the positivity that they had and picking each other up. We hadn't really seen that in that Clay Helton era because I feel like they were just, once the deficit happens, you kind of have that mindset of, here we go again, like that one meme. But this time, I mean, it just didn't happen. And I think that halftime speech probably just lit him up. So Donte Williams, that was really the big thing, the energy and the adjustments.
Even if they come out with all the energy in the world for the first quarter, the second quarter, all the quarters, the rest of the season, they're not going to win every game by 31 points. Why don't we talk about some of the things that happened in that game? And let's sort of try to analyze what was for real and what was not. I like to give you the floor to start these things off. I'm going to start it here because my big thing as far as the least sustainable aspect of that game was the running game. And when Jaxson Dart was throwing the ball the way that he was, and when Drake London was receiving the ball the way that he was, Gary Bryant Jr. had a nice game too. You don't really need to rely upon the run game very much. It would have been nice to see them establish it a little bit more when things got out of hand, but Dart ran for 32 yards on 6 carries. 18 of those came on his first snap, which was an 18-yard carry. But then beyond him, Ingram, 7 carries for 16 yards. Vavai Malapaya, 9 carries for 9 yards. Gary Bryant Jr. had the 1 rush, technically, for a touchdown, 3 yards. And then Keaton Slovis, negative 10 yards, but probably just a sack or something like that. So not great. The passing game was strong. It was working. It was allowing them to pull ahead in the third quarter. But I don't know. Let's face it. All due respect to Washington State, you're probably going to be facing defenses that are more talented. Think UCLA, think Oregon if they get to the Pac-12 championship. And I don't know, if you can only rush the ball for, quick math, 48 plus 12, which is 60 yards in a game, and 32 of those are going to come from your quarterback on scrambles. Doesn't really feel all that sustainable for me. It feels like without that aspect of the game, it's going to be hard to put up 45 points every single week. Yeah, so that was a little bit concerning for me. I thought the offense looked obviously by far the best it's looked all season for many reasons, not just Jaxson Dart, but the running game, concern for me. What about you?
Yeah, the running game practically non-existent. They couldn't get anything going. Keontae Ingram, Vamel, nothing was working. And I think you can kind of attribute that to the offensive line kind of getting just overwhelmed. I mean, I think they kind of switched up the left tackle position at one point in the game, moved it out, so there might have been something there. But yeah, the run game just wasn't working. And in terms of what's for real, I really do believe that after this game, it's going to get a lot of more confidence for the other receivers outside of Drake London. Kyle Ford even had a touchdown. Gary Bryant Jr., Taj Washington. If those guys really start getting balls and they start contributing, it's going to be a really talented receiving corps, something that we really haven't seen. We didn't see for sure in the San Jose and Stanford games. So for them to pick up, I think at the right time, that's good. That's going to be important. And also the defense. I know against Stanford, 45 points, not impressive, not great. And granted, with all due respect to Washington State, the competition is not the same compared to Stanford, but they still, I mean, look, they gave up 14 points pretty easily in that first half, and I was expecting them to get more. So to hold a team, and even without first downs for like basically the entire third quarter, was very impressive. I mean, no matter who you were playing. I mean, they didn't do that against San Jose State. And with all due respect, against San Jose State is not as great as Washington State. So that defense, I think, is beginning to be for real again. I think the Stanford game was an outlier. They were great against San Jose State. And they really showed it again against Washington State. They just got to be consistent. They really have to be consistent. And another thing you talked about, the pass game. It felt like I was finally watching an air raid team just flying all over the field. And that's really what we've been asking for, specifically myself. I've been hard on Keaton Slovis. I've been hard on Graham Harrell. So to see that finally an air raid offense that was flying around like that was very pleasing for me, especially with all the receivers that were getting love. So that's for sure, I think, going to be a question going to this week, who's going to be starting. So it kind of depends on that. But the defense, I think, really is just very for real. I think that's probably the most confident I am in all those other position groups. The run game is still a problem, even after the first 2 games where they look like the best position group and the best offensive value for the Trojans.
I want to talk about Drake London for a second. You talked about some of the other receivers who had a nice game. Gary Bryant Jr., Kyle Ford, they were all pretty good. Drake London, 170 yards, which is a career high. It feels like every single week now we're saying Drake London set a career high in receiving yards because his role is just expanding and expanding. And when USC's offense starts to hit a wall, they just go to him, and it seems to work out. I think that's really sustainable. To be completely honest, I get it when people are concerned about, you can't just give the ball to Drake London every single time and have him bail out your offense. Why not? This is one of the most talented receivers in all of college football. Biletnikoff Award. I mean, right now, I saw a tweet earlier today that I don't have the exact numbers, but it was something like he leads all of Power 5 wideouts in catches, yards, and like 5 different other categories that would have sounded cooler if I had memorized them. But anyway, her point is Drake London is playing like an absolute beast. Donte Williams said it after the game. He was like, somebody asked him, were you trying to get the ball to Drake London more in the third quarter? And he was like, Drake London's a beast. Of course I was trying to get him the ball more in the third quarter. Like, you got to drop plays for him. And I'm like, yeah. I mean, he can't be your only guy the entire game. But if there's a stretch every game where it's like, okay, nothing else is really working. Let's just throw the ball to one of the best receivers in all of college football and have him work. Why can't that work? It's not like he's going to drop off and get much worse. I mean, he's only getting better every single week. He had a bad drop, which was uncharacteristic of him. At some point in the second or third quarter, I don't remember exactly which quarter, and then ever since then, it seemed like that lit a fire inside of him, and he was just dominant. I mean, there were stretches in that third quarter where, 3 straight plays they would hit him for a combined like 60 yards, and he would make some insane grabs like in traffic on balls that were thrown pretty well. But then he had the one touchdown where Dart kind of forced it a little bit, and he just grabs it, and he had another touchdown like that too. I mean, this was one of the best performances I've seen from Drake London since he came to USC. And for the people that are like, this isn't going to work, I say, why not? He's a stud.
Yeah, no, I mean, I definitely agree. I think he's right now at his best. And it's not only just like him getting open through route running, but the yards after catch, he's been very, very difficult to bring down. Like there was that one run against UCLA last year that I thought, wow, that's great. I mean, that was just ridiculous, but he's somehow gone better than that. And the offense seems to click better when he's involved. I mean, it's like, honestly, like no coincidence. When you get the ball to your best receiver, everything is going to be great. But I think it's very sustainable because he's still everyone knows the ball will be going to Drake London, but he's still able to get open somehow. So I think that if Dart or Slovis starts, they're going to be looking for him for sure. And I think the offense just flows better because once you start giving attention to Drake London and you realize, okay, he's catching all these balls, and the other receivers start getting open because of all that attention he's getting. So it's a win-win. And I think he's, like you said, Blitz-Kickoff winner. He's in the lead. I wouldn't be surprised if he takes it because really there's no receiver like him right now in the country.
The one thing I also thought was not very sustainable was the slow start. It ended up not mattering in this game because, let's be honest, they were playing Washington State. Washington State's not a great football team. But if you're going to start slow the way that they did and you build yourself into a 14-0 hole, even if that was, or especially if that was 21-0, like it almost was, except for the goal line stand that happened in the second quarter, as we talked about. But that's coming against a team like Oregon or maybe an Arizona State or a UCLA. If they're still good, they lost to Fresno State. They might not be as good as we thought, but I think they're still a pretty good team. If you're doing that against teams that are better and aren't going to let you, basically just rely on your offense to put up 45 unanswered and come back and blow them out, that's going to be a problem. I don't think it's going to be something that continues to plague this team. I think that there was just kind of more of a one-off. Guys were talking after the game about how they were all kind of pressing pretty hard, trying to play hard for Donte, and I get that. I don't think that's going to be too much of an issue. Maybe I anticipate the crowd at the Coliseum this upcoming weekend is going to be pretty rowdy. It seems like people are pretty excited about the future of this team. Maybe that adds a little bit of adrenaline to this team, and maybe it sort of backfires and they come out sloppy. But I mean, again, it's Oregon State. It's not like that's something you can't really dig yourselves out of. I think by the end of the season, when they come to playing, Notre Dame, UCLA, Oregon, if they get to the Pac-12 championship, that shouldn't be a problem that really sticks with them long term. But it's just something to watch out for if they're playing stronger competition. You don't want to dig yourself into some holes like that, obviously. But we've been hinting at it for the last, 20 minutes since we started the show. Let's get into the topic that's on everybody's mind right now. It is the $1 million question. I feel like nobody has. People certainly have opinions about it. I don't know if anybody has an answer yet, especially Donte Williams, Graham Harrell, and the two quarterbacks involved. So, Anthony, this time I am going to open the floor up to you. I think this is an extremely difficult question. I have a feeling I know what you're going to say, but you're Donte Williams, you're Graham Harrell, you're whoever you want to be. Week 4, who are you starting, Jaxson Dart or Keaton Slovis?
Look, I've been the Keaton Slovis believer for a while, and this season I've turned into a hater because, we've talked about it before. The performances have not been that well. They just haven't been great, from my eyes. And look, I'm not an expert, okay? I'm not Adam Schefter or anything. But based off what I've seen, it's not been great. It hasn't been impressive. San Jose State was like a so-so game. Stanford was not great, the lowest passing yards he's ever thrown in his career. And he hasn't thrown over 300 yards yet. Granted, it's been 2 games, but it hasn't. Like San Jose State, you would expect a 300-yard game. So, and based on really what happened the previous game, it's Jaxson Dart should be the starter. That's really what I think, and I'll tell you why. Specifically, like let's say the first half USC's offense still didn't play great, even when Dart was in. So you kind of can't really blame that on Slovis and say, oh, but if Slovis was in, the offense didn't play well. But that second half, I really haven't seen the offense play that well in a while. Definitely, maybe the last time was against Washington State last year. So maybe it's a Washington State thing. But the way that offense was clicking, the way the offense was going, and the energy that Dart was bringing onto the field, and the way that the team was kind of going around him, I think honestly, and Donte Williams has been talking about change. He's been talking about doing different things. I think it might be the best thing for now. Keaton Slovis, granted, look, I want Keaton Slovis to succeed. I'm not a hater. He's an outstanding talent, outstanding player. I think a change won't hurt. And if he starts, like I understand if he starts, because he's still an amazing player, and you got to give him a shot under a new coach, because he basically only played two, 3 snaps. So you got to give him a shot under Donte Williams. Let's say he plays under Donte Williams and he doesn't perform well. And Donte Williams also mentioned that he was going to use a Jaxson Dart in red zones and third and short type plays. And let's say that those plays go successful, maybe you can think of a change. I say start Jaxson Dart, but really I think the safe thing to do is to start Slovis if he's healthy and he's able to play. But I would welcome a change if I was Donte Williams. Now, I know a lot of people probably think I'm crazy for that, but in a season where you just fired your coach and then Keaton Slovis got injured, and that second half, Dart, he almost threw for 400 yards in his first game, 4 touchdowns. Granted, Washington State, not a great football team. It's your first game. Scouting report isn't too deep, isn't too heavy, but you just can't. 400 yards, 4 touchdowns is no joke, especially in your first game. And the way the offense was moving and clicking, and maybe it was Graham Harrell's play calling too that also changed. That might have played into something. But Keaton Slovis, I think that it would be a good move to give Dart a chance. Let's try against Oregon State. Let's see what happens. And if it doesn't work out, we can move on and let's see what happens. That's really what I'm saying. But Keaton Slovis will most likely start. I don't think Donte Williams will be ready to make a change like that. But I think Dart would be a good dart throw to start Jaxson Dart. Our first call.
So here's what I think. First of all, you said people are going to think you're crazy for thinking that it should be Jaxson Dart. I actually think the opposite. For what it's worth, nobody follows me on Twitter. That's a big qualifier that I have to give before I say what I'm about to say. But I put a poll after the USC game ended, after they won 45-14 over Washington State in Pullman. And I said, you're Donte Williams. Everybody's healthy. Who starts next week? Keaton Slovis, Jaxson Dart. Granted, again, my Twitter following is small, but 74% of people said it's got to be Jaxson Dart. And here's where I'm at. People were calling for Slovis to be benched in favor of Dart even before the Washington State game. And I was passionately against that. I said, look, right now, Keaton Slovis is the most experienced, obviously, and he's just the most reliable. He's, as you said, he's probably the safe bet. You have to keep on riding him until, he really starts to falter. And I'm sticking by that. I don't think that they made in any way the right call in sending Keaton Slovis out to start week 3. I think it would have been crazy if they didn't do that. But basically my point was that Keaton Slovis probably gives your offense the most reliable and the safest bet, right? Because you can throw him out there, and his floor is pretty high. Like the Stanford game, no, he wasn't great, but he wasn't bad. It wasn't like he was the reason why they lost that game. And I don't think he's been a reason why they've lost any of the games that they've lost over the last couple seasons. Sure, he hasn't had his best performance in the Pac-12 championship against Oregon or week 2 against Stanford, but the problems have run much deeper than him. And I think that they had to stick with him until somebody else actually proved that they might be able to take it from him. Jaxson Dart might have done that. And I don't know how you can look at week 3, that game where he threw for 391 yards, the most in a Trojan debut since JT Daniels threw for 282 in 2018, and say that he doesn't give the offense the best chance to be a powerhouse. Maybe there's a way to do a sort of 2 quarterback tandem kind of thing. I would be open to that. I think that there's definitely ways for them to get creative. use Jaxson Dart's dual threat profile, use Keaton Slovis's more experienced veteran skill set, and sort of see what they can do with them together. But I think it's really hard for Jaxson Dart to put up the performance that he did yesterday and then say, okay, you're going to go sit on the sidelines again and you're not going to play unless Keaton Slovis gets injured. That just seems really difficult to me. This decision would be a lot easier if their years were flipped, if Keaton was the freshman and Dart was the junior, because then it's like you ride it out. He's been your guy for the last 3 years. You keep on going to him. Then you're saying the guy who was playing super well is the guy that's only going to be here for one more season. Now, like I said, there might be that inclination to say he's been your guy. You have to ride with him until he's not there anymore. But I also think it was telling the way that they gave Clay Helton such a short leash, firing him after 2 games. And Mike Bone, in his statement announcing that move, basically said, we have some things to accomplish this season. This season is not dead in any way. The only thing that's probably dead is the college football playoff, which I don't know if they went out. Do you sort of give them a pass for the loss that happened under a different head coach? Probably not. I'm just saying that's probably the only thing that's really out of the picture for this team right now. And it comes down to winning games. This is USC. This is a turning point in the direction of this program. And it's going to be a tough call. I don't think Keaton Slovis should just be a non-factor. Like, I don't think they should just not use him at all. I think there's a way to use both. But I don't think you can reasonably justify just sitting Jaxson Dart after what he did and the way that the offense sort of rallied around him. That's not to say they don't rally around Keaton Slovis, but guys like Chris Steele we're talking about, he's a leader. He's when people speaks or when he speaks, people want to listen. And Gary Bryant Jr. was saying he's always had the talent. That's never been a problem, but he showed today that he's got heart. And Steele was like he's a leader. And I don't know, they're rallying around him just as much. And obviously, they don't have the chemistry with him yet that they've had with Slovis for the last 3 years. I just think you've got to let the kid play. You have to ride that out. You have to take that offense and see this is what it can be. This is what we can do with Jaxson Dart in there. You got to let him play. You got to let him play a bit. I don't know if they're going to end up doing that because it's hard to tell Keaton, look, you haven't been that bad, and now you just lost your job because you got injured. So I don't think they should maybe do that. Not that they should make an emotional decision. It's tough. It's really tough. I don't know what they're going to do. I think there's got to be a way to involve both. Maybe give 60% of the opportunities to Jaxson Dart. But again, benching either one of them is incredibly difficult. I think it's even more difficult to bench Jaxson Dart at this point.
Yeah, look, honestly, I really agree with all that. I think you have to use him somehow. And it's not only just his talent, but the energy that he brought to the offense and him being a dual threat that really difficult to defend that. And if he starts against Oregon State, against a really rowdy crowd at the Coliseum, I mean, I think the game could be over quick. But you can't. It's a situation because you can't bench Keaton Slovis because things you said. He's got experience. He'll make safe plays. He'll be reliable. But Jaxson, I think his ceiling is higher than Keaton Slovis. I think we can agree on that. And his floor may be a little bit lower, but the ceiling is higher. He can make those explosive plays. He can do it. But he's just a freshman. And I think you've got to somehow mix it up and say, hey, maybe we can use him in certain situations. I think that's your best bet. But you can't bench him. Just benching Jaxson Dart would not be smart because the way the offense kind of rallied around him, and the way you said that too, the team is kind of really rallying around him, and they're all kind of protecting him and saying, yeah, we knew he was like this. He's a leader. Chris Steele, to call Chris Steele upperclassman, veteran of this Trojan team, to call Jaxson Dart a leader, it was really impressive to me. And his first game, and he's barely been around the team. He's a freshman. So that's something you really pay attention to.
Yeah, and Steele's a cornerback too. It isn't like he's hanging around with him all at practice. Yeah.
So it's a tough situation, but I think it's really not a controversy because I think they'll be able to use both, but they've just got to figure out, like you said, that load of who takes the more snaps because you can't bench either one of them. It just wouldn't make any sense.
I thought it was really interesting the way Donte Williams approached that question in the post-game press conference.
Yeah.
He was non-committal. They would ask him, are you committed to Keaton as the starter? And he said, it's going to be a battle every day at every position. I don't know. That doesn't sound like a guy who's just going to revert back to Slovis, the experienced guy, if he's healthy. Our answer, use them both. Let them both eat. Compromise. Everybody wins. Everybody's happy. I don't think the fans are going to be upset about that either. I think they acknowledge that both these guys are really talented. One more thing I want to get into before we wrap up, and this can take 30 seconds. It's just a little footnote that I thought was weird. USC loses to Stanford by 14 points in a game that was really more of like a 24-point game or 28-point game. A couple garbage time touchdowns. Clay Helton's still around when the AP poll comes out. They are unranked with 39 votes. Then come in under Donte Williams, interim head coach, and they go and they win by 31, and they're still unranked with 16 votes. Can you explain that?
It makes no sense. Doesn't really add up.
Doesn't really add up. Anyway, just a footnote that didn't really make any sense. I think we know that the college football rankings don't make much sense. If they come out and they play against Oregon State the way that they played against Washington State, it will be hard not to see them back in the rankings, but who knows? I can never read the minds of the voters. But anyway, that's going to do it for this edition of Trojan Dash. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. It's been a crazy week, a crazy game yesterday. Thanks for joining us to break it all down, whether you're live or watching later. As a reminder, remember to follow us on all of our various social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Snapchat, and follow Anthony and I on Twitter as well. Our handles are listed below. Make sure to tune in every Sunday at 8 p.m. for Trojan Dash, and check out all of our other great shows across Dash Sports TV as well. We'll be back here next week at 8 p.m. after what should be a fairly easy victory over Oregon State. I can say, look, usually I say they should win, but they might not because this team makes no sense. I feel like this team is starting to make a little bit more sense. So I don't know. We'll see what happens then. Probably going to win. If they lose, well, it'll be an interesting show. Either way, we'll see you back here at 8 p.m. next week.